Hi, I'm Vic Iyer, CIO Marketing Services. Building an effective AI strategy is important, but in a competitive economy, businesses must target implementation. Those who manage to integrate AI into their business can potentially benefit and achieve success if they do it right. In this CIO webcast with Hitachi Vantara, featuring IDC guest analyst Peter Rutten, we're going to discuss how business can implement AI effectively to deliver results. Later, we'll talk once again to Jason Hardy, Chief Technology Officer for Artificial Intelligence at Hitachi Vantara. But first, Peter is going to give us some insights into what's happening in the dynamic world of AI.
Thanks, Vic. Um, yeah, I'm happy to start. I think I'm not saying anything new when I'm stating that generative AI has been a absolutely transformative technology. Um, we're seeing it being used for chatbots, for coding, for customer service, even for R&D to find new materials or to make new product designs. Hundreds of thousands of LLMs, large language models, have been developed by enterprises, by hyperscalers, by academia, by the open source community. And many organizations have started a Gen AI proof of concept to determine how to invest in Gen AI and to generate business value, because that's ultimately what it's all about. Um, these POCs allow an organization to very quickly learn whether their use cases are feasible, whether they will provide that business value, and whether they will fit in their technology environment. We're at a stage now where IDC is seeing many businesses attempting to move from that POC to production. And that's the point where they're starting to see a lot of challenges. Gen AI in production means training an AI model at scale or fine tuning it, and then integrating the AI functionality into your existing business processes. Of course, very quickly this becomes an almost continuous cycle that you're going to find yourself in. Scaling a Gen AI proof of concept to production is complex. It requires a lot of planning and testing and meticulous implementation. We talk about a phenomena here at IEC that we call POC limbo. It's something we see all the time, where the effort it takes to move from POC to full service production has been underestimated and leads to a Gen AI initiative essentially dying on the vine. And then what happens is, when you're in that limbo, the hope for business value that the AI was going to deliver is out of reach, and because the environment was really not fit for operations in a real life setting. And nevertheless, business leaders in these organizations are very anxious to have Gen AI in production, in place, and they're short on patience to let these POCs drag on for too long, and they want to see that value. So there's quite a bit of tension there between what we are attempting to do and what is achievable and what the expectations are. So let's talk a little bit about the proof of concept stage. When you're developing a small version of what you anticipate the AI solution to be. Um, what organizations do first is they test to determine whether it is viable and whether the underlying assumptions for the solutions have been correct. You'll typically start with the most desirable use cases, which you should have defined before you even start your POC. Those are the ones that you want to test first. Our data shows that the most common number of POCs that organizations have been running in the past 18 months is somewhere between 10 and 20. So it's interesting that we're not just talking about an organization having one or two AI initiatives. There are dozens in most organizations. Now, about 50% of those are moved, or in our data, were moved to production by the end of 2024. About a quarter completely failed. That's pretty high, and 25% is still struggling. Um, it is very important at this stage to address a few things. What are the expectations of the stakeholders? Do you have comprehensive use case definitions? Have you defined the value that you are hoping to achieve? Do you have a roadmap for your AI initiatives? And maybe most importantly, do you have a robust ROI that shows that you are going to generate not just value in general, but monetary value? Um, a lot of organizations start the POC with prominent sort of proprietary LLMs, the ones we all know about from the major providers, but there are lots of you know organizations that start with an open source model. They can be just as good as, and they can often be smaller and cheaper, as long as the development tools are there, and that's very important. And as long as you know that the model is suitable for the use case that you're hoping to develop. It's an iterative process. There will be lots of feedback loops. Many stakeholders will want to be involved and hear how things are going. You'll have to adjust the model many times by changing the parameters or the data. And one of the things that you'll find yourself doing is this is also the point where you're seeing whether you need agentic AI, which is AI that takes autonomous decisions, and whether you're going to be using RAG, retrieval augmented generation, which is we're seeing a lot of adoption of RAG in enterprises these days. Performance of the model will be critical. You're going to be looking at that in the POC. If it's not optimized, then it will probably not work well in production. You will have to identify performance bottlenecks. And at this stage, because of the performance expectations, a cost assessment is going to be very important. What is it going to take this into production? Because that's ultimately where the cost, especially with regards to infrastructure, is going to play a role. You have to talk about where you're going to host the model. In the cloud, in our data center, do you want it to be stateless or serverless? Do you want it to be stateful? All these things are very important discussions. And then, of course, the data strategies, hugely important. What data will be needed? What's the data quality? Data preparation. There's an enormous process that goes into AI before you actually start training that is about preparing the data. Sometimes some data shows that 80% of the time is just taken up by that. Are you able to handle unstructured data? Not everybody can. Images, text, and video. You need the right environment for that. Is your data secure and compliant? Something that we're seeing is that helps is automated data input into models. It makes them more dynamic and more adaptable. So that's another thing to consider. And then while you're in that POC, you're going to be testing for performance, for accuracy, very important with a model, obviously. Again, value, security, reliability, something that's overlooked, compliance, and of course, ethical robustness, which is something that everybody cares about. And then you're sort of at the point where you're starting to transition to training and production. And you will be looking again at, are these the use cases that we want? Is this the value that we need to generate or want to generate? Do we have a roadmap? And do we think the ROI is still valid? Transitioning to training in production, you will find very quickly one of the most immediate things you're looking at is skills. Do we have the right data scientists, developers, the infrastructure team, the cloud team? You may find yourself thinking about the models that you've used. If you used proprietary large language models, those can be very large, very expensive to scale. Do you want to convert to smaller open source models, for instance, at this stage? And then, of course, just with the POC, excuse me, you need to decide where you're going to deploy this production system. In your enterprise data center, in a cloud, in a colo, managed service provider. Each of these has its own pros and cons. So you're looking at either OPEX or CAPEX. What are my data management tools? Do I have AI tools available, or do I need to find those myself? What is the scaling? How can I optimize the infrastructure? What is the model design? Again, is it stateless or is serverless? Can I get the security and compliance I need? All these things are going to be important in your decisions as to where you deploy. Um, Things to look at are, again, data security once you're training in production, but also now you're starting to face things like model hallucination, ethical violations, and now these are happening at scale. And so costs play a role again, because every time you reiterate, you're increasing cost. You need access policies at this point. You need data governance, and you need to be very focused on finding the training bottlenecks that are going to be also evident once you start going into production in terms of inferencing. So, do you have the GPU capacity? What's your network like? Can it handle the bandwidth? Is the latency good? Do you have the storage capacity? Do you have the right storage? Do you have the right software stack? Okay, I'll take up not too much time anymore. We are now moving to inferencing in production. So this is where you're actually starting to deploy the model. What are you dealing with there? You're managing many simultaneous queries with large data inputs and outputs in near real time. So this is really challenging. Here too, you have to make decisions where you're going to deploy. Same considerations as for training. You're going to have to anticipate that there will be larger amounts of simultaneous queries than you expected if you're successful with your AI system. That can choke the system. Users can get cut off, or you'll be looking at more compute that is going to cost more when you're running in the cloud. What also can happen is that the data inputs from the users and the data that they're requesting, the outputs, turn out to be much larger than you had experimented with. So, for instance, larger images or larger videos than you had in your POC, all really challenging for your environment. You need the same access policies, you need the same data governance that you had in training. And you're looking at maybe even more challenging infrastructure requirements, because now you're live, your users are depending on you, and your data volumes is going to require the network bandwidth. The concurrent queries are going to require parallel compute. Your fast, the expectations of fast performance means that you need very fast reads and writes in your storage, so you need that technology. Low latency networking is all very important. You have to ask questions like, do you want to build this yourself, this complicated infrastructure, or do you want to use turnkey solutions? And then ultimately, it has to be integrated into the entire landscape, which is not easy either. You'll have to do load testing, and like I said earlier, there's going to be that classic RAS, reliability, availability, serviceability, that you need to build in there to keep the SLAs that you're promising. I won't go on too much more. I think MLOps is very important, AI lifecycle management. You have to monitor the model for performance and accuracy once you're up and running. And it's always recommended to build in feedback loops so that the model can retrain itself for better accuracy. And then I'll stop here. It's really recommended to make this entire process that I just sort of very roughly described repeatable, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you start up a new AI initiative, but you can basically start feeding this beast in a sort of continuous fashion.
So, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to speak with Jason Hardy. We've spoken earlier, Jason, about AI transformation, so it's great to be with you again. And of course, in your experience, I'm just wondering, are there commonalities emerging between those who implement AI effectively, perhaps in terms of culture or maybe approach?
Yeah, no, it's great to be here again, Vic. It's always wonderful having these conversations. And Peter, thank you for that, like, kind of summary of it's complicated. So, but I think what we're finding is, as with anything new, it's complicated up front, but through innovation and through just that muscle that gets exercised, it becomes less complicated. think virtualization is a good example of that, and even adopting the cloud and things like that. So we're kind of still in the same theme of how things simplify over time. But I can say that the juice is worth the squeeze. So from our perspective, I think when we look at who's effectively implementing AI versus who's implementing AI, those are obviously two very different things. What we see is organizations with a plan, organizations with a set of skills, either brought in through partnerships or brought in as augmentation to the staff through headcount and things like that. That, again, establishing that baseline of skills is really important, because now you understand how to step forward from there, and you're doing it from a strong foundation. The other side of it too is understanding a roadmap behind it, understanding what is the goal that we're trying to achieve. Initially up front, everyone made this headlong rush into AI, and it turned into this like, hey, I'm just going to throw it against the wall and see what sticks. Now what we're seeing is a lot more of a refined approach. And I think it has a lot to do because now ROI is a popular topic around, hey, we're going to make this investment. Are we actually getting our money out of it? Now, what we're also finding is traditional ROI doesn't really align with this, because again, we're still kind of in this experimentation, pre-enterpriseness phase. So from our perspective, it's that planning through it, establishing a roadmap, understanding the data necessary for it, and then going into this kind of eyes wide open, realizing it takes infrastructure, it takes investment, it takes people, it takes a strategy, and you have to make sure that the rest of the estate is ready to support this from a data perspective, from even your users' perspective. So success looks like now today, people who are planning for these in a more methodical way, and then are taking a pragmatic approach into how they're addressing, we want these outcomes, we want to improve our business, but let's not, I say this a lot, but let's not go after the core of the business. Let's start on the peripheral. And then as we exercise this muscle and become more expert, create more expertise around this, then we can start to move more and more closer to the core of our business, which again has more and more value attached to it. But through supporting, how do we improve on HR? How do we improve on customer service? Things like that. That's a great way to start, and then start to address it from there to, hey, manufacturing insights, hey, generating new products, hey, doing, again, all those great things that Peter opened up with. Getting there, there is a reality to it, but you don't start there, and you don't have this immediate expertise that gets you there. You need to do this over time. And that's where we're seeing a lot of approach now, and it's creating a lot more momentum and success behind it.
One thing I just wanted to add one thing. So those are great points Jason's making. What we've seen is that there's so much excitement and interest in generative AI just among the public. You know, you're seeing in your regular newspaper AI getting on the front pages, and we've rarely before seen that with enterprise technology. You know,
yeah.
But
when was the last time you saw VMware on the front page, or virtualization on the front page of something?
Exactly. Yep. So, but what I've seen is that a lot of organizations are understanding the difference between all that excitement and a lot of fluff too, and what they are going to do with this technology, and they're being very careful with it and very focused and slower than maybe you would expect given all this sort of public excitement about it. So step by step, they're taking it, and I think that's the smart thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think all this, science fiction, of course, had so much of a preoccupation of these subjects as well. That's probably injected some of the public excitement, perhaps more than some of the other enterprise technologies. And I just wonder, Jason, are you seeing particular use cases that are emerging that are particularly strong with good return on investment? Or is it a case that it's actually varying quite a lot between businesses and sectors?
It varies business to business. Market to market. There are some horizontal areas that we are seeing improvements on, things like knowledge management, how to better engage with your employee, how to embed, like through HR efforts, things like that that are very horizontally focused, that aren't manufacturing specific or aren't financial services specific. So we're starting to see successes in that space. And that's specifically because of, again, that how do I start at that pragmatic way so I'm not going after the core of it, starting at the edge. So it's that edge kind of use cases where there is value in it. There's as much value in the failures as there are the successes. In fact, I would argue there's more value on the failure side of it. That's where people are cutting their teeth and really starting to learn about this. And then plus we also have other organizations that are providing services to some customers as well. So that's, again, where they're focusing on is like, how can we improve on customer service? How can we improve on customer 360? How can we do better HR engagement with our staff? So that's where we're seeing a lot of initial success. We do have industrial sectors that are starting to see focused success on things like manufacturing improvements. Again, like what Peter said on the R&D side and things like that. So it is starting to spike up beyond just the general horizontal into some of these verticals. But it also depends on really the level of risk adverseness there is in these organizations to step into that. Research in healthcare, for example, is great. Hey, how can we improve on cancer research and get closer to that cure? But maybe not necessarily like direct patient interaction. So there's that, again, different pockets in different markets where they do have a little bit more of that aggressive nature to it, that they do see the value from it. So again, we're starting to see some of that. But I would say by far and away, the broadest sense of what we're seeing right now is really in those more horizontal plays that are in common services across any enterprise organization.
One of the things that I'm hearing is expectations about productivity improvement, and exactly, it is horizontal. Sometimes it can be for certain specific functions within an organization, but productivity improvement is very high on the list of Gen AI use cases.
Yeah, absolutely, and it comes top of our CIO studies. I think last couple of years, it's employee productivity is very much the top objective for those who are investing into AI.
It's that ROI thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, in my job, I write a lot of white papers, and my organization has embedded a Gen AI executive summary generation tool in Word for us, which is great. I could easily spend an hour and a half on writing a summary of my own white papers, and now it's being generated automatically. And stuff like that is fantastic. It saves time.
And talking of studies, I wanted to raise the Hitachi Vantara's State of Data Infrastructure report, because it actually found that IT leaders rate data quality as the number one importance factor, but perhaps surprisingly, robust infrastructure was rated as the least important factor. So I just wonder, Jason, if you could tell us a bit more about what successes you have seen with AI implementation and how robust infrastructure actually plays perhaps a more important role than one might think.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting point that we found out there, and obviously things are evolving a little bit, but the premise still remains the same: is data importance high, infrastructure kind of tertiary, even fourth, fifth ranking from what's being thought about. What we're seeing is kind of two things here. Why the data side is so important is that garbage in, garbage out problem. Understanding, like what Peter said, is like data is the fuel that powers this engine. I think everyone says that today, but it's true. It's, hey, we need to be able to have high quality inputs so we can actually get real outputs that are free from bias, that are completely trustworthy, that have all the necessary kind of framing of them so that there's value. And we're actually, again, we can generate that ROI from it. But what we've also seen is that there was like a mad dash to do this on things like the end of the pandemic, where supply chain was still a little bit under constraint. So the cloud was the natural fit to start this. What we're seeing now, though, is one, and we know this, the cloud is not there to be expensive. It's there to be, or to be cheap. It's there to be flexible. So with that comes a cost. And people are realizing now that as they run these high scale inferencing workloads or training workloads or just experimentation workloads, that cost is adding up. And so infrastructure on-prem is starting to trend in because one, they can, again, that hey, we buy once, cry once, where I have this investment now, and now I can leverage it however I want, and I'm not having to continually pay for it in the hardest sense. So that's one side of it. So that trend is moving in on there. But we're also seeing it because, again, we're stepping into the age of inferencing, like what Peter had said, is that in that there is a need for higher volume workloads, higher end user or system interaction, which is less predictable, but also the data required, again, going to point number one, is in a lot of cases more sensitive, a lot of cases not cloud appropriate, or more importantly is our customers live in this hybrid ecosystem where it's a combination of on-prem and in the cloud and kind of this blending between it all. So the on-prem naturally fits better when you have this unawareness almost of where the data all sits and how you're going to interact with it. Because again, it's a lot more predictable. So we're seeing now that trend of saying, hey, one, larger enterprise adoption is driving more need for enterpriseness and bringing it on-prem because of data sensitivity, like I said. But also two is, as we start to look at how it integrates in with business processes, is needing it to be closer to the data, closer to the process, and closer to the person. What that means is that, for example, if I'm doing manufacturing and I'm relying on my generative AI platforms or even just traditional AI platforms, I can't wait for the cloud to make a decision and then to come back to me. I now need more real time, more edge, more at least data center level latencies. So that needing to make a real-time decision in a short amount of time drives now the proximity of these services closer. So we're seeing a lot of that, especially in like the energy and in the manufacturing and even in some cases financial services spaces. So it's now this shift into being enterprise focused and needing that enterpriseness, and also how it's being adopted in what data it requires, what level of interaction, and then also in how quickly we need to turn around results. There's also this concept though of like what Peter again had said, he had a lot of really good points, is RAG, things like fine tuning, all the adjustments that need to be made, things like that. Again, you need this infrastructure to be able to do that, but you can also use that same infrastructure for context switching, i.e. you can go from training to inferencing inside the same infrastructure so you can sweat that asset better. So it's using infrastructure underneath it to help power the GPU to do some of these kind of multifaceted responsibilities. So that's a big piece of how we're seeing this trend to move infrastructure on-prem, because again, there's a lot of key roles that are starting, or a lot of key themes that are starting to play a really heavy role in that. And accessibility to the technology is just one of them.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a move. I might almost say a move back to on-prem for AI, for both for training, fine tuning, but also for inferencing, RAG. That's definitely in our data. It shows up. I want to address very quickly the infrastructure robustness ranking low. I think, and it's an interesting point, because what it means is it's all about who are you talking to in an organization, and this is exactly what every organization needs to keep in mind, which is you have your AI data scientists, you have your AI engineers, you have your developers, you have your lines of business who are asking for that value, and can we get this done? And then there's the infrastructure team.
Exactly. Yes.
And I talk to infrastructure teams all the time, and they are, and the way they interact with these other stakeholders is often, at which point are they being brought in? Is it at the POC concept? Is it after POC? Is it before training starts? And they
usually it's when a bunch of stuff shows up on the loading dock.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and for them, it's very important to be involved from the beginning. Be part of that first team that starts to investigate, because everything that you are going to do as an organization with AI will have huge impact on infrastructure decisions and infrastructure management, and it is a major cost factor. You need to keep that, and as soon as you keep your infrastructure team in the sort of in the loop, you will also allow them to try to keep that cost down, rather than being surprised by something and having to immediately try to provision and be ready for what you're trying to do.
Yep, that's a great point, Peter.
Yeah, that's really important context, Peter. Thank you. And in that research I mentioned earlier, almost all the respondents cited needing external help to support AI implementation. So I wanted to just briefly zero in on that Hitachi Vantara perspective, because you have a lot of experience at Hitachi Vantara in a variety of disciplines. So how useful is that when it comes to helping businesses achieve success with AI, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, again, like what Peter said at the beginning, the need for skills that are tailored to support this is super important. And it's not commonplace. It's starting to ramp up, but it will take years to get to the point where it's as common as a data scientist or as a virtualization engineer or something like that. So being able to bring in perspective is super important. And because of the prowess and the industries that we work inside of across the broader even Hitachi ecosystem, is it gives us this ability to connect the OT, the world that we operate inside of, the operational technology world, and the IT side of it, and what it takes to actually power and support both those themes very, very closely. So through that context and through the decades and decades of capabilities that we've built out, it gives us this ability to properly define and bring in the right skills to define the right, again, what's practical for things, and then to be able to step it forward from there. So it's not just skills augmentation, but it's also perspective. And so in bringing that in, it helps us define, first off, reality for a customer. Absolutely. The capabilities for AI, and now stepping into agentic AI, and very soon we'll be into physical AI through robotics and things like that, it's rapidly evolving. So it's being able to bring in, one, have our finger on the pulse of what's going on in these markets, but also or these technologies, but also bring in a level of practical kind of awareness of what is realistic, what will be successful, and then help them get to that point. I mean, I have over 4,500 machine learning engineers who just work on projects that are just engaged in and work on projects. And so that skill set is not easy to find. So we can bring in and augment skills while the customer ramps up their own skills, and then we can ramp down. But at the same time, too, it's also, again, perspective of, it's not just the AI machine learning pieces. It's, what does data mean for this? How do you build out these platforms that are designed to scale very large and have these massively parallelized workloads? What does it mean from a business perspective when you make these decisions? So rounding all of this out is really important as we start to discuss this through customers and bring these disciplines and experiences in, so that the customer doesn't have to fail as many times. I'm not saying it's bulletproof, but what I am saying is we bring a lot of like, hey, we learned and have the scars from this already, so you don't have to necessarily go through that. And then again, just helping the customer evolve into, again, that successful space, exercise that muscle, and create that flywheel that allows now for that just natural motion into the next and into the next, while realizing, again, what we've learned along the way.
Yeah, Jason, it all makes a lot of sense. And I would like to just throw it forward as well, because our users love to hear about future trends, and particularly with AI being so dynamic. It almost feels like it's constantly evolving, really. And how will future development impact the art of AI implementation, in your view, Jason? I'll come to you as well, Peter.
It's going to change. I mean, look at just what's happened this last year. NVIDIA is heavily invested into rounding out their ecosystem, and they acquired Run AI, and that was finally approved. So, like, it's not just AI that's evolving. It's not just Gen AI, like I said, agentic and things like that are coming online, but it's also just the how to simplify the management of it, how different frameworks are going to be brought in. It's also on how different technologies are going to be addressed into this space. DeepSeek is a great example of this. I'm not shocked that DeepSeek came out. It's a natural progression. It's innovation. That's what happens with innovation. You have disruptors in it. DeepSeek, the model itself, but what the capabilities are that they brought into it, things like, again, how you can see its kind of train of thought and how it's kind of processing through that, and how it's used better reinforcement training inside the models themselves, and different methodologies around that. That has accelerated and provided a different context now to like what that means moving forward. We're going to continue to see disruptive innovation like that into the market. We have to. That's just the nature of where something that is complicated becomes easier, and that's because of those innovations along the way. So we're going to see a lot of simplification of it. We're going to see better scale where we don't need as much to do as much. And all of this, though, will just be through the natural progression of innovation and what happens over time. Will it be totally earth-shattering stuff this year? Who knows? I think, again, agentic AI has the potential to really disrupt how businesses operate. So everything that gets invested into that, I think, will have a very high return on it. But it's, again, only stepping into the what's next after that. And right now, who knows? It's going to be a fun ride. I do know, though, that the enterpriseness of this, the maturity that has to come into this technology, is we're starting to see that. So that now allows for the customers that we normally service, those who are, again, more enterprise focused or a bit more conservative in adopting new technologies, there is a level of trustworthiness that's starting to come into this technology. So we're starting to get out of teething pains and into like the pubescent stage of AI and how it's, again, being forced to grow up very quickly. And again, we're going to continue to see a lot of that from a generational improvement perspective.
And Peter, I mean, you must have some interesting perspectives on this as well, with your data background and all the trends that you're seeing.
Yeah, let me give you a short-term and a long-term perspective. Short-term perspective, I think the move to industry specific is going to be very important. You know, there's almost only so much you can do with ChatGPT. It's a general purpose thing. And it's great. You can do fun stuff with it. But what enterprises are increasingly looking for is very industry specific, very business specific AI solutions that are very tailored to everything that they are doing. And every organization has its own unique processes. So that's one thing. Also, within the short term to mid term, I would say you will see enterprise integration. So these are not going to be standalone AI solutions that are sort of running somewhere. They are going to be fully integrated into the processes that an enterprise has. And then in the long term, I would say every major technology like AI will evolve to greater efficiency. And I think the efficiency gains we're going to be seeing with AI are going to be tremendous. And to Jason's point, DeepSeek was a sort of an early warning signal. This is going to continue. We'll see increasingly efficient AI solutions to the point where AI doesn't require those, huge build outs of 10,000s of GPUs to train a model anymore in, let's say, 10 years or so. So that's it will become a more general purpose workload over time.
Thank you, Peter. Just very brief final points from you both. I'd love to. We've had such a fascinating discussion covering many points, but could you just perhaps just sum up what you think that the key points are you'd like to leave our audience with? And perhaps, Jason, you could go first.
Yeah, of course. No, I think from our perspective here, Hitachi Vantara, like I said, it's that. Like I said earlier, the juice is worth the squeeze. The journey to get to the realization and the ability to benefit from AI outcomes is well worth it because the potential there is limitless. it takes the right partner and the right technology and the right stack and all of those to be able to get to that point. So doing this on your own can be very complicated. It is a complicated technology. So having the right partnership to be able to get to that point will highly benefit our any customer who engages on this. And then understanding, and it's understanding along the lines of like, what does data mean for this? What does like the technology mean for this? What buying decisions do I need to make for this? All of that getting wrapped into it. That's all of these complicated things that you have to understand. I think Peter did a really great job of laying out kind of what you need to consider on this. So the biggest takeaway is like, it's worth it. It's an investment, but most importantly is pick the right partner, choose the right partner who can bring that perspective and has that approach and can be very methodical about this so that you can realize the success along the way.
And I would say I would completely agree with that. And then I would say on top of that, I would strongly recommend include your IT infrastructure team from the start, from the very beginning. And actually for two reasons. One reason is a lot of your success is going to depend on them knowing exactly, understanding what you're doing, and being able to respond to that and facilitate everything you need. The other is there are quite a few very interesting generative AI use cases for running IT infrastructure. So not only will they be there to support you, they will also bring in a number of use cases that can really increase your productivity, maybe lower your cost, and streamline your organization. So bring IT in from the beginning.
Yep, absolutely. Peter, it's a team effort, and that's huge. Absolutely.
Very, very wise words indeed. And that does bring us to the end of this CIO webcast with Hitachi Vantara featuring IDC guest analyst Peter Rutten on mastering AI implementation. I'd like to thank Jason and Peter for sharing their expert insight, as well as everyone who watched. Goodbye.